Welcome to Exhibition. And hello, Lenore Howard.
Hello, Richard. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to see you there with a very large piece of your early work behind you. But today we're looking at your present exhibition, which is Beyond the Sight of Land at Northside Contemporary Arts in Cairns. And this is a major body of work. It's a huge exhibition at Northside. Can you first of all just briefly break down for us the components of this exhibition?
It's a group of works on paper, a big, large group of that. It's also some ceramics, but the major component are cut-out shapes, where I've painted on these irregularly cut-out shapes.
So let's go to some of those first, because they are quite large works and very striking in their two-dimensional sculptural qualities on the walls of the gallery. As you say, they're cut-out shapes, but how do you go about the process of deciding the shapes and then the painting of the shapes, and which happens first?
I sometimes just design the exterior perimeter of the architecture of the work, and then I try and work out what I'm going to do on that completely blank white surface. And sometimes I actually do the design and transfer, just while I'm working on the paper, various values and tonal arrangements, so compositions and lines and mark making. And then I get the shape cut out and go about trying to initially, I always distress the surface first with unrelated marks. These works have not started at all with a rectangular shape, which I then cut up after I painted it. They've all started with an irregularly cut out shape, and then I paint, trying to make it work as I felt the shapes would be okay at the very beginning. And a very interesting question I have to ask myself with each of these is, when you've got an irregular shaped perimeter, do you work the paint lines and marks and whatever to work around with the shape, or do you have a shape like that and then you push through it so that you change the expectancy of what it should be? What really happened was that sometimes you work with the shape and then you work against it in the same work. So I try not to be too predictable.
The title of the exhibition overall is Beyond the Sight of Land, and the series of works that we're talking about at the moment are also beyond the sight of land, 1, 2, 3, etc. That suggests that these works in particular are where you have really gone out a long way from the security of the coast and really put yourself out there on a limb, so to speak, to mix metaphors. Did these works feel like a particular challenge for you in that way?
Every single work that I do, I'm hit with a challenge, because I'm starting from no recognisable object, and the title of the exhibition comes about because I'm leaving behind all known references. I'm not using any recognisable object or situation from which to create the work. So it's completely heading over the horizon into unknown territory. I used to be a surrealist artist, and I would paint quite realistic objects, but I would place them out of context to create a story. There was a lot of social content in those and a lot of political content too. But I reached a stage in 2003 where I decided in my last major exhibition of that, which was held in Melbourne, that I had gone through a huge metamorphosis in my own life, and I didn't want to be painting and carrying the weight of that anymore.
You mentioned challenges and the actual presentation of these works, the attachment of them to the walls so that people can walk around the gallery and see them in the way that you intended, I imagine must have been quite difficult in itself.
Ashley Campbell is the director of Northside. She's absolutely astonishing. That organisation has supported me in every way, shape and form. And she organised with a professional installer to come out to my house, and we worked on the kitchen floor, which was very convenient because it's got its tiles and it's got a natural grid. I had about 18 paintings to do, and I thought I'd get the easy ones first for her. And it took us all day to do 6. And she was working till 6 o'clock at night. And she had to come back again, of course. But, you know, we've started to get into a roll of things towards the 17th one.
But they all ended up on the wall, and they're there now in the gallery, very clearly displayed for viewers. Can you just take us back to the sense of these works? How would you describe to somebody the nature of either the theme or the intent of the Beyond the Sight of Land series?
The intent was always about materiality and being present with the moment. So it's more like a philosophical approach. What I found was that there was an element of tension and balance, which was coming in a different way, because the shapes would come, you know, sometimes they meet and sometimes they're close. And sometimes it's in the painting, in the composition, you know, a tension of 2 marks coming close together. Sometimes they cross over as well because, you know, nothing like bashing through the fence with a bulldozer, because I'm like that too. But there's also tension in the, particularly in works that have more of falling. There's a couple of works which are almost sculptural in there. A lot of works were just not being realised until in the last few months, I started to take them to a whole new level of balance and space. And I think I'm incorporating negative space in a way that I haven't really quite seen before in 2-dimensional work, by making the works a bit more sculptural like this and using the, you know, falling elements, the space of those falling elements. And different works can have energy in a different way, but for me, it's about moving the paint, you know, across the surface. So I will balance that with a plain area of paint with a very textured, dynamic brushwork, because I don't want to make it messy all over. I think it's good to have contrast.
That tension or energy of juxtaposition that you talk about, of almost being in contact but not quite. The wall of works on paper, in some ways, is that writ large, because you have, I think, something like 60 works, overall titled Dissolution of the Elements, but they're all next to each other, all on the one wall. What was the intent of that arrangement?
Well, I knew I had 60 works. I knew, in fact, I had more than that. We couldn't put them all up, but it was the curator, the director, who, she had this vision of doing this blast of colour and texture. And I think it looks amazing. It's a wow moment for people actually coming into the gallery to see that. And some of those works on paper have taken me as long as some of the paintings.
How would you describe the basis of those individual works? What in each of the works are you trying to focus on and move towards?
I want to work on some various processes. I want to have an adventure with the process. I don't want to just paint, you know, how I've done things in the past. I wanted to be experimental, and I was becoming overwhelmed by trying to paint a picture when I was working on the big shapes. So I thought I would take myself out of that expectation and have a calmer, smaller expectation of working on a sheet of paper. But, you know, the same principle applied. But they are very much tied in with all those processes I do on that paper. The same principles apply to how I work on the cutout shapes.
We've talked about the wall of abstract painted works, but there is also a similar wall of black and white monotype or monoprint works. Again, can you give us a little bit of a sense of the background and the decision to exhibit those works? Again, a different type of approach.
Well, I was trying to transfer paint onto my major paintings or even onto the works on paper, the coloured wall. And it just wasn't working for me. So I thought I would go and investigate mono printing. And at the TAFE, where I became a student again.
So this was something you hadn't really done before. You decided to explore an entirely new medium.
Yes, I explored an entirely new medium, and that was, so I took myself off to where I used to teach, and they accommodated me very beautifully. And so I started working with this black and white inks. I thought I'll just start simply, because when I do a new body of work, I like it to start with black and white and greys. And the reason why I can't call them mono prints is because I would print them and then I would get them back, and then I would use the same printer's ink, but water it down or whatever and start moving across the paper, and that takes it from a mono print, which is just one, going through the press and never touch it again. And then that wasn't enough for me. I had to keep playing with it. So I had to call them monotypes.
Let's head for the great outdoors now with a further series of works in this very substantial exhibition. And that is the series Connecting with the Elements. A number of works. And were they essentially created, at least in part, in an outdoor environment?
They were created entirely on site, out bush, and I was taken out there by a very dear friend of mine called Kerry Trapnell, who is a professional photographer, a very famous photographer who's very well known. He's photographed for 30 years up in the Cape, and he knows the area so well. I wanted to use the elements, and I did have materials like pastels and charcoals and ink and all that sort of stuff and brushes, but I thought I just want to see what I can do just using the elements. And I had a thing in mind. We got out there one night and had the fire, and then I got the ash, and then I was working with putting the ash on the paper and then using the running water, the actual creek, to move the ash around on top of the paper. And so then I knew I was going to be working with fire and embers and things like that. So it just became, I just became immersed with using the ash. What's interesting is when I was out there, you have these big long spears with the, I don't know what they're called, but they've got black things on top. And there were some of those on the ground. So I was pushing them into the abandoned fireplaces in our ash, and I was moving that to make marks across the surface as well. And I think the work is sort of, it has a sense of being ephemeral, and this ethereal quality to it. And it is not, when I'm in my studio, I've got what I call the bugbear of perfectionism. It sits on my shoulder, and everything, I mean, I will do messy paintwork. I'm a fully abandoned painter in there and moving stuff around, but it's always got the pulse of, all the experience of my past painting history comes into the knowledge that you bring to that surface. But when I'm out there, something different happens, and there's a sense of freedom and abandon, which I don't feel in the studio.
Let's turn, if we can, to the body of ceramic works in the exhibition, because again, this is an area for you that is relatively recent.
I was introduced to it through Northside when they had a little, they invited some artists to do some workshops experimenting with a new medium. And so I helped organise that. And so I was one of the artists, and I thought, okay, well, I have to do it too. But doing it, I thought, you know what, I've never really experienced ceramics fully. I should actually give this a go. So apart from the, monotypes and the other experiments, I think everything feeds into each other. I don't think anything is ever completely isolated,
How would you describe the ceramic objects that we see in this exhibition?
Well, it took me 2.5 years to come to a resolution that I was happy with. And once again, I'm using fire. And fire played a part in the paintings. I was out there putting fire on those, some, old fence timbers, fire with the works on paper out with Kerry, and now with the ceramics so I tried lots of different experiments, and I was walking to TAFE one day and I came across a fallen palm, the base of a palm tree leaf that had fallen. And I looked and stopped and looked at it, because I'm always looking at nature anyway. And I thought, that is such a simple form. It's a very elegant form. So I had found the form that I wanted. And sometimes that simple form is a catalyst for finding what I hope was a sophisticated shape in which to place to play with the raku fire. Because once again, every time you can use exactly the same clay, exactly the same, kiln, whatever, but everyone will come out completely different.
With so much variety of form and different media within the exhibition, and with it being such a substantial body of work, as a viewer comes into the spaces and walks around them, what do you hope that they're going to experience or be moved to think about?
Well, I find it very hard to put myself in other people's shoes and what they think and feel. In fact, that's the joy for me, to allow them to do whatever outcomes they have for them is good. For me, I hope they get excited by seeing work which is by the same artist, but not an artist who wants to be in a box. And, someone who has resolutely challenged themselves. All I can say is that when I enter the studio, I go in there with a total commitment to not allow anything to go past me, which I think is not exciting for me, that doesn't work. But it was interesting, you don't really know how it's going to stand up until it's on a clean white wall in the gallery often.
It is a very significant body of work. And Lenore Howard, thanks for sharing your exhibition with us.
Thank you, Richard. My pleasure.